She belongs in the garage, Rick said with a straight face. He handed me a plate. Paper, lukewarm turkey, watery potatoes, and behind him, Danielle smiled. I thought that was the worst of it, until I saw the baby monitor pointed straight at my tray. They weren't just feeding me like a stray dog, they were watching me eat, listening, laughing, and using my dead husband's money to fund her damn eyelash salon. What they didn't know, I wasn't just hungry, I was watching them back, and I wasn't the one about to beg. But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. My name is Anna Wilson, and I'm 70 years old. After my husband, Tom, passed away last spring, I sold our little craftsman in Oregon and moved to Rick's, my son's place in Henderson, Nevada, trading morning fog for desert heat. My daughter-in-law Danielle's designer heels click past my doorway like tiny hammers, her smile tightening whenever I venture into the kitchen. Rick, my only son, used to call me twice a week when I lived alone. Now he barely meets my eyes across the breakfast table, especially when the topic of the house money comes up. But what they don't know is that Tom left me more than memories, left me options. They think I'm harmless. That's exactly what makes me dangerous. But let me start from the beginning. The first few weeks after Tom's funeral were a blur of paperwork and lonely nights. I'd sit in our empty Craftsman, touching the worn arms of his favorite chair, wondering how 47 years of marriage could suddenly feel like smoke. That's when Rick called with his offer. Mom, why don't you come stay with us, as long as you need? His voice was warm, like when he was little and would crawl into my lap during thunderstorms. We've got plenty of room, and you shouldn't be alone right now. You know that feeling when you're drowning and someone throws you a rope? That's what his words felt like. I'd raised him right, I thought. My boy still had that good heart. The house sold quickly, the market was hot that spring. When I handed Rick the $78,000 check from the sale, he promised to put it toward household expenses and getting me settled. We're family, he said, squeezing my shoulder. We take care of each other. Danielle was waiting in their driveway when we pulled up, arms crossed over her designer workout set. She gave me one of those smiles that never quite reaches the eyes. Welcome, she said, then turned to answer a phone call while Rick and I lugged my suitcases inside. The guest room was lovely that first night, soft blue walls, a window overlooking their neat backyard. But within 2 weeks, Danielle started making comments about needing a proper home office for her lash salon business. It's just temporary, Rick assured me as we moved my things to the converted laundry room. Until we figure something else out. The laundry room had no door, just a curtain that never quite blocked the light or sound. The water heater's constant hum became my white noise machine. I tried to stay positive, arranged my few precious photos on the wire shelving unit, but strange things started happening. My mail bills, bank statements, even birthday cards from old friends would vanish. When I mentioned it to Rick, he'd shrug. Probably just got mixed up with our stuff. I'll look for it. He never did. I noticed my name wasn't on their whiteboard grocery list in the kitchen. When I'd add items just basics like my preferred bread or the calcium supplements, my doctor recommended they'd be crossed off before anyone went shopping. Oh, we're trying to streamline, Danielle would say. You understand. What really set off alarm bells was when I asked about Tom's estate paperwork. We'd had joint accounts, investment funds he'd managed for years. But every time I brought it up, Rick would get this tight look around his eyes. Mom, don't worry about all that right now, he'd say. I'm handling everything. Trust me. I did trust him. Maybe that was my first mistake. Then came Thanksgiving. I'd spent the morning helping prep, peeling potatoes and rolling out pie crusts just like I'd done every year when Rick was growing up. The kitchen filled with those familiar holiday scentsage, butter, roasting turkey. For a moment, it felt almost normal. When dinner was ready, I reached for one of the plates Danielle was setting out on their gleaming granite counter. That's when Rick cleared his throat. Mom, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. It's easier if you eat in the garage. I laughed, thinking he was joking. But his face stayed serious, and Danielle was suddenly very busy arranging silverware. The garage? My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. We've set up a card table out there, he said. It's just easier, with the space and everything. My hands trembled as I took the plate he held out. The garage was cold, dusty, filled with exercise equipment they never used, and boxes of Danielle's salon supplies. They'd cleared a corner, set up a wobbly card table under the fluorescent lights. I sat there alone, listening to the muffled sounds of my family laughing and talking through the door. The turkey grew cold on my plate as tears slid down my cheeks. I thought about Tom, about how he'd react if he could see his son treating me this way. That was the moment something shifted inside me, like a switch being flipped, or maybe a lock clicking open. I wiped my eyes and straightened my spine. They thought they could treat me like a stray cat, something to be fed scraps in the garage? That first garage dinner set the pattern. Every day, Danielle would appear with my tray, barely glancing my way before retreating back into the warm house. The garage door would close with a hollow thud, leaving me alone with the cobwebs and old paint cans. You know that feeling when something's so awful it almost seems funny, like your brain can't quite process that it's real? That's how those first few meals felt. The card table wobbled every time I cut into my food, and that folding chair squeaked like it was crying right along with me. The overhead bulb buzzed and flickered, casting weird shadows across the concrete floor. Everything smelled like gasoline and old rubber from Rick's stored-up winter tires. Some days I'd catch glimpses of mouse droppings under the workbench, and I'd push my plate away, appetite gone. My granddaughter used to run to hug me whenever I visited. Now, if we passed in the hallway, she'd duck her head and hurry past like I was a stranger. I'd hear her laughing with Danielle in the kitchen, while I sat out there among the cardboard boxes and forgotten Christmas decorations, trying to keep my fork from shaking. Those first few days, I cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Just quiet tears that dripped onto my collar while I forced down whatever Danielle had decided I deserved that day, usually lukewarm leftovers, served on the cheapest paper plates she could find. Remember how I mentioned Tom and I had been careful with money? Well, that first week in the garage, I had plenty of time to think about those missing bank statements, about Rick's evasions whenever I brought up the estate paperwork. The numbers kept spinning in my head while I picked at my meals. 78, 0 from the house sale, our joint investment accounts, Tom's life insurance policy. Then on day 6, I'll never forget this. I noticed something odd in the corner. Behind a stack of Danielle's salon supply boxes sat an old baby monitor, its little red light still blinking. The camera was aimed right at my sad little dinner spot. My heart did a funny little skip. I remembered when Rick was tiny, how we'd used one of those to keep an ear out for his midnight cries. But this wasn't about watching a baby. This was about watching me. Danielle. It had to be. She was always so careful about security, always needed to know everything happening in her precious house. Even the garage, apparently. I dabbed my napkin against my lips, mind racing. If she was listening, watching, well, maybe it was time to give her something worth paying attention to. The next evening, I started talking to myself. Just quietly at first, like someone who didn't realize they had an audience. I wonder what Tom would say, I murmured, pushing peas around my plate. All those accounts we built together, all those careful investments. I paused, fork halfway to my mouth. The executor should have contacted me by now. Isn't that how these things work? Each night, I dropped little crumbs of conversation. Numbers, mostly. 78,000 from the house sale. Where did all that go? Or, that mutual fund Tom set up must have matured by now. The one he said would be worth 6 figures. I'd glance at that baby monitor sometimes, its red eye watching. Once or twice I could have sworn I heard movement on the other side of the garage door, like someone standing very still, listening. Maybe I should call the bank directly, I said one night, making sure my voice carried just enough. Ask about those trust documents Tom mentioned before he passed. The ones Rick keeps saying he's handling. The next morning, Danielle was especially short with me. Her perfectly manicured hands trembled slightly as she handed over my breakfast tray. I noticed she'd switched the baby monitor to a different outlet, one partly hidden behind a toolbox. That's when I knew I had her. She was listening all right. And from the nervous way she kept rearranging her designer bracelets, what she'd heard had her worried. I hid my smile behind my coffee cup. Let her spy. Let her wonder what else I might say into that empty garage air. Because sometimes, when people think they're being clever by watching you, they forget to watch themselves. That evening, I settled into my usual spot at the wobbly card table, pushing aside a stack of Danielle's salon catalogs to make room for my plate. The garage felt especially cold, and I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders. The memory of Tom and me going over our will together floated through my mind, how careful he'd been about everything, how he'd wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I should really look at those trust documents again, I said to my meatloaf, loud enough for the baby monitor to catch. Tom was so specific about the inheritance structure. I stirred my green beans around. He mentioned something about quarterly distributions. A burst of static made me jump. Then, clear as day, Danielle's voice crackled through the monitor's speaker. "She's not on the trust. She has no idea. We're safe." My fork clattered onto the tray. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The words hung in the air like poison. Not on the trust? But that was impossible. Tom and I had gone over everything with our lawyer. I'd signed the papers myself. How could I not be? My hands started shaking so badly, I had to grip the edge of the card table to steady them. Through the monitor came the sound of footsteps moving away, a door closing. They'd forgotten to switch off their end of the connection. I sat there in the darkening garage, my dinner growing cold, those words playing over and over in my head like a broken record. She's not on the trust. She has no idea. We're safe. Safe from what? Safe from me? You know that feeling when a puzzle piece suddenly clicks into place and the whole picture changes? That's what happened in my mind that night. Every odd moment, every evasion, every lost piece of mail, it all started making a horrible kind of sense. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Danielle's voice. She has no idea. The words felt like little needle pricks in my heart. My son, me own flesh and blood. What had he done? The next morning I told them I was feeling under the weather. "Just need to rest," I said, making my voice weak and wavery. Danielle's perfectly plucked eyebrows lifted in what might have been concern if you didn't know better. But I did know better now, didn't I? I lay on my narrow bed in the laundry room, keeping my breathing slow and even. The dryer hadn't been run in days. Funny how they never seemed to do laundry when I was actually trying to sleep. But today, its silence worked in my favor. Through the thin wall, I could hear them in the kitchen. They were speaking in low voices, but not low enough. "The lawyer says it's all legal," Rick was saying. "The paperwork's ironclad. It's better this way. You know how confused she gets sometimes." My heart nearly stopped. Confused? I'd never been confused a day in my life. But what if she starts asking questions? Danielle's voice had that whiny edge I'd come to know so well. What if she talks to someone? Who's she going to talk to? Rick's laugh made my stomach turn. "She doesn't know anyone here, and it's all for her own good anyway. You've seen how she is with money." How I am with money? Tom and I had managed our finances just fine for 47 years. We'd put Rick through college, helped with the down payment on his first house. And now he was, what? Protecting me from myself? "Once we file for conservatorship next month, it'll all be settled," Rick continued. "The trust, the accounts, everything. She'll be taken care of." "In the garage," Danielle added with a little laugh. I pressed my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound. Conservatorship. They were planning to take everything, my independence, my dignity, my very right to make decisions for myself. The storm building in my chest wasn't just anger anymore. It was something colder, clearer, like ice forming over a deep lake. My son and his wife hadn't just betrayed my trust, they'd plotted against me, manipulated me, and now planned to strip me of everything I had left. I lay there, perfectly still, listening to them discuss my future like I was a problem to be solved. And in that moment, something inside me changed. The mother who'd baked Rick's favorite cookies, who'd kissed his scraped knees and cheered at his graduation, she began to fade away. In her place, a different woman emerged, one who remembered every account number, every document, every detail Tom had ever shared with her, one who knew exactly what she needed to do next. The next morning, I waited until Rick and Danielle left for work before sliding my ancient laptop out from under my bed. The laundry room's single outlet meant unplugging the washing machine, but that was fine. Nobody did laundry when I was in here anyway. My hands trembled as I plugged in the USB drive I'd kept in my purse. Tom had always insisted I keep copies of everything important. Just in case, he'd say with that gentle smile of his. The memory of him sitting at our kitchen table, carefully labeling folders and showing me how to save files, made my throat tight. You ever notice how the smallest things can bring back a whole flood of memories? The whir of that old laptop starting up took me right back to our sunny breakfast nook, Tom's reading glasses perched on his nose as he explained about digital backups. I opened my email first, scrolling through years of correspondence. There it was, the original trust documentation from 5 years ago, when Tom had first set everything up. My name was right there, clear as day. Primary beneficiary, with Rick as secondary. Everything exactly as Tom had planned it. But the newer documents? My stomach churned as I opened file after file. No mention of me, not a single reference. Just Rick's name, over and over, with Danielle listed as contingent beneficiary. The dates caught my eye all. The changes had been made within weeks of Tom's funeral, when I'd barely been able to get out of bed, let alone check legal paperwork. I pulled up the signature pages, zooming in close despite my aging eyes. The signature that was supposed to be mine looked wrong. The loops were too tight, the slant too steep. Someone had forged my name, and I had a pretty good idea who. "Oh, Tom," I whispered to the empty room, "what would you say if you could see this?" The walls of the laundry room seemed to close in around me. I needed help, but who could I trust? Rick had probably told everyone I was losing my mind. Danielle had made sure I hadn't made any friends in town. My old neighbors were thousands of miles away. Then I remembered Mr. Wallace, Tom's accountant for over 30 years, the man who'd helped set up the original trust. He'd retired just before Tom got sick, but he'd sent such a kind note after the funeral. Would he even remember me? I found his number in my old contacts and stared at it for a long moment. What if he'd moved? What if he thought I was just some confused old lady? What if... The phone rang in my hand, making me jump. I'd accidentally pressed call while lost in thought. My finger hovered over the end button, but before I could press it, "Hello?" The voice was older but still sharp, still familiar. "Mr. Wallace?" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "This is Anna, Tom Henderson's widow." There was a pause, and I held my breath. "Anna?" The warmth in his voice made my eyes water. "Of course I remember you. Tom talked about you every time he came in 47 years of marriage, wasn't it?" "Yes," I managed, wiping my eyes. "Mr. Wallace, I need help. Something's very wrong with Tom's trust. Call me Wallace, please." "And what do you mean, wrong?" I told him everything. The changes to the trust, the forged signatures, Rick and Danielle's plans for conservatorship. My voice shook, but I got it all out. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd lost the connection. "Anna," he finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I have Tom's original files right here in my home office. I kept copies of everything after retirement. Call it an old accountant's habit. Would you like me to take a look?" "You still have them?" The relief made me dizzy. "You do that?" Tom was more than a client, was a friend. "And what you're describing, that's not just unethical, it's criminal. Give me an hour to review everything." I gave him my cell number, the one Rick didn't know about. As I hung up, I heard the garage door opening. They were home for lunch. I quickly shut down the laptop and tucked it away. For the first time since I'd heard Danielle's voice through that baby monitor, I felt something other than fear and anger. I felt hope. Wallace remembered. Wallace believed me, and Wallace had proof. The diner was one of those old-fashioned places with vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone on. I'd picked it because it was far enough from Rick's house that we wouldn't run into anyone who knew them. Wallace was already there when I arrived, a stack of folders beside his coffee cup. "Anna," he said, standing to help me with my coat. "I ordered you some tea English breakfast, 2 sugars. Tom always said that was your preference." My throat tightened. Tom had remembered such a small detail about me, even in business meetings. I settled into the booth, wrapping my cold hands around the warm cup. "I've been reviewing everything," Wallace said, opening the top folder. "And there are irregularities. The trust modifications were processed through a notary named Janet Mills. Does that name mean anything to you?" I shook my head, but then stopped. "Wait, Janet. Isn't that Danielle's friend from her yoga class? The one who does real estate paperwork?" Wallace's eyes narrowed. "Exactly. And her notary stamp appears on every document removing you from the trust. Documents you supposedly signed while, according to these dates, you were still arranging Tom's funeral." The tea turned bitter in my mouth. "I never signed anything. I didn't even know I'd been removed." "Of course you didn't." Wallace pulled out another paper. "And that's not all. The bank statements show large transfers right after the trust was modified. Money that should have been protected for your care." I set down my cup before my shaking hands could spill it. "The $78,000 I gave them to help with bills, what happened to it?" Wallace's expression darkened. "It went straight into a business account. Lux/Lounge, LLC, registered to Danielle Henderson. Her salon?" The room seemed to tilt. "She used my money to start her salon?" "Every penny." He spread out the bank statements. "See these transfers? They match exactly with the construction costs, equipment purchases, and initial inventory for her business. She's been running it with your money for months. You know that feeling when something finally makes sense, but you wish it didn't? That's how I felt looking at those numbers. All those times Danielle came home excited about her growing business. All those designer bags she'd started carrying. My retirement savings had funded her dream while I ate alone in their garage. I thought." My voice cracked. "I thought I was helping the family, contributing to household expenses." Wallace reached across the table and patted my hand. "You were deceived, Anna. Deliberately and systematically deceived. But we can fight this." I nodded, trying to focus. "What do we do first?" "We gather everything." He started organizing papers into neat piles. Bank records, trust documents, proof of the forged signatures. "We'll need statements from your doctors showing you're perfectly competent. And we should." He stopped suddenly, staring at his phone screen. The color drained from his face. "Wallace, what is it?" "I set up alerts for any legal filings involving your name," he said slowly. "One just came through. Danielle. She's filed for conservatorship." "Conservatorship?" The word felt foreign. "What does that mean?" "It means she's trying to take legal control of your life. Your money, your medical decisions, everything." He showed me the filing. "She's claiming you're unable to care for yourself or make sound decisions. The hearing is set for 30 days from now." The diner's fluorescent light suddenly seemed too bright. 30 days? That's all I have?" "That's all we have," Wallace corrected firmly. "And it's enough." "But Anna," he leaned forward, his voice dropping. "We need to move fast. If they get conservatorship, everything we've discovered becomes moot. They'll have total control." I thought of my tiny room, my disappeared mail, my meals in the garage. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about my freedom. "Tell me what to do," I said, straightening my spine. "Whatever it takes, I'm ready." Wallace pulled out a legal pad. "First, we document everything. Then we contact my friend at the DA's office. Financial elder abuse is a crime. And Anna?" He looked at me over his glasses. "We need to get you somewhere safe. somewhere they can't interfere while we work. The diner's harsh lighting made the conservatorship papers seem even more threatening. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, and I could feel my heart racing beneath my cardigan. I can't breathe," I whispered, fumbling with my water glass. "If they get control, I'll never." Wallace's steady hand covered mine. "Anna, look at me." Deep breaths. "We're not letting that happen." I forced myself to match his calm breathing. You know how sometimes panic feels like you're underwater, everything muffled and distant? That's where I was right then. "But 30 days, I managed. "How can we possibly?" "We've already started," Wallace said, pulling out a legal pad. "First, we document everything, every scrap of evidence that shows their deception. Then, we file our own sweet elder abuse, financial fraud, the works, beat them to the punch." I dabbed at my eyes with a napkin. "What kind of evidence?" "Everything. Mail they've hidden, bank statements, conversations you've overheard. Start taking pictures with your phone discreetly. Note dates, times, anything unusual." He wrote rapidly as he spoke. "Keep a diary. Record Danielle's conversations through that baby monitor if you can. The more documentation, the better." Over the next week, I became a silent detective in my own prison. I photographed stacks of my mail I found hidden in Rick's home office while tidying up, kept careful notes of every time they excluded me from family meals or decisions. Even managed to get pictures of Danielle's salon renovation receipts, the ones that matched perfectly with my missing money. The hardest part? Acting normal. Every morning I smiled at breakfast, nodded at their conversations, pretended nothing had changed. I even complimented Danielle's new designer handbag, the one I knew my retirement savings had probably bought. But the strain, Lord, the strain was getting to me. My hands shook so badly sometimes, I had to hide them in my pockets. I barely slept, jumping at every sound, terrified they'd somehow discover what I was doing. 10 days into our evidence gathering, Danielle cornered me in the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me wash my dinner plate from the garage. "You're different lately," she said, her eyes narrow, all cheerful. "What's going on?" My heart hammered, but I kept my movements steady, focusing on drying the plate. "Oh? Hadn't noticed." "No, there's definitely something." She stepped closer. "You're up to something, I can tell." I turned to her with the most grandmotherly smile I could manage. "Just enjoying the quiet, dear. At my age, you learn to appreciate simple things." She didn't look convinced, but what could she say? That I was suspiciously happy? That my contentment made her nervous? Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I met Wallace in his car around the corner. The streetlights cast long shadows as he passed me a thick envelope. "I have something to show you," he said, his voice low but excited. "Remember how I mentioned I had been watching them?" I nodded, thinking he meant our recent surveillance. "No, Anna. I mean, I've been watching them for months, since before Tom passed." He pulled out another file. I never trusted Rick's sudden interest in the estate planning. Something felt off. So I kept tabs on him professionally and personally. My hands froze on the envelope. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've been monitoring his work at the wealth management firm, his client accounts, his transactions." Wallace's eyes gleamed behind his glasses. "And what I've found? Well, let's just say your son hasn't only been stealing from you." "Rick?" My voice caught. "He's been mismanaging client funds, moving money between accounts without authorization, small amounts, carefully hidden, but it adds up." Wallace tapped the file. "The kind of thing that ruins careers and triggers federal investigations." I stared at him, understanding slowly dawning. "You've had this all along?" I needed to be sure, to gather enough proof. He smiled grimly. "And now, with what they're trying to do to you, I think it's time we used it." The streetlight flickered above us as I absorbed this revelation. My quiet, unassuming accountant friend had been 10 steps ahead this whole time. While Rick and Danielle thought they were so clever, Wallace had been building a case that could destroy them. "What exactly are you suggesting?" I asked. Wallace leaned back in his car seat, the streetlight casting shadows across his face. Your son's firm, Meridian Wealth Management, they're obsessed with their reputation. One whiff of impropriety, especially involving family finances and their compliance department, goes nuclear. What kind of nuclear are we talking about? I asked, my fingers tracing the edge of the envelope he'd handed me. Automatic internal investigation. Full audit of all Rick's accounts. They'll freeze his client access immediately while they review everything. Wallace's voice had that precise tone I remembered from all our old tax meetings. And once they start digging, well, they'll find what I've already documented. I thought about Rick's perfectly pressed suits, his constant talk about maintaining appearances at the firm. He'd lose everything? His job, certainly. His professional licenses, probably. His freedom? Wallace shrugged. Depends what else they find. But Anna, he turned to face me directly. This isn't just about punishment. This is protection. Once an investigation starts, they can't touch your assets. No conservatorship hearing will proceed while there's an active fraud investigation. The practical side of Meath Part, that had managed a household budget for 40 years, appreciated the elegance of this plan. What do you need from me? I've drafted a formal complaint. He pulled out a document. It details the trust manipulation, the misappropriated house money, the financial isolation, everything. Your signature here makes it official. My hand trembled slightly as I took the pen. They'll know it was me. Eventually. But by then, it won't matter. Wallace's voice softened. Remember what Tom always said about chess? The best moves are the ones your opponent sees too late. I finished, smiling at the memory of my husband's favorite saying. The pen felt steady now. I signed. I'll deliver this to Meridian's compliance office first thing tomorrow, Wallace said, carefully tucking the document away. Then we wait. We didn't wait long. The next afternoon, I was in my usual spot in the garage, pretending to read while actually watching through the window. Rick's car screeched into the driveway 2 hours earlier than normal. He burst through the door, phone pressed to his ear, face flushed. No, sir. I understand the severity. Yes, I can explain everything. His voice carried through the baby monitor. I'd learned to keep close. Please, just let me. Another call beeped through, then another. I heard him pacing, his shoes clicking frantically on the hardwood floors. Danielle's voice joined the chaos. What's happening, Rick? Why is your boss calling me? I don't know. They're saying something about a complaint, allegations of... More beeping interrupted him. I have to take this. Fix it, Danielle's voice rose sharply. Whatever it is, fix it now. Through the window, I watched their perfect facade crumble in real time. Rick's calls grew more desperate. Danielle's heels clicked back and forth across the kitchen. Their voices overlapped in a symphony of panic. Immediate suspension pending investigation. What do you mean they're auditing everything? Who would dare? I sat quietly with my book, sipping tea from my thermos, letting their fear wash over me through the monitor. The garage felt warmer somehow. Late that night, after the house finally fell silent, I heard them arguing in their bedroom through the thin walls. They're looking at everything, Danny. Everything. The trust changes Mom's accounts. So what? We did nothing wrong. It's all legal. Is it? Rick's voice cracked. Because I'm not sure anymore. The dates on those documents. Don't you dare fall apart on me, Danielle hissed. This is just some mix-up. You'll go in tomorrow and smooth it all over. That's what you do, remember? You fix things. But I knew better. You can't smooth over truth once it's exposed. You can't fix betrayal once it's documented. And you certainly can't stop an avalanche once it starts rolling. I pulled out my phone and texted Wallace. It's begun. His reply came quickly. Round 1 to us. Sleep well, Anna. Tomorrow we move to phase 2. I closed my eyes, finally relaxed enough to rest. In the distance, I could still hear Rick's phone buzzing with messages he'd rather not read. Wallace wasn't kidding about phase 2. While Rick spent his days trapped in endless meetings with the firm's auditors, my old friend was methodically building our legal case. We met at different diners each time and ever, The same place twice, spreading papers across sticky tabletops between coffee cups and half-eaten pie. Every document tells a story, Wallace would say, arranging bank statements like playing cards. And yours reads like a crime novel. I watched him work, marveling at how his careful accounting revealed the truth hidden in numbers. The 78,000 from my house sale had indeed gone straight to Danielle's salon startup, not bills as they'd claimed. The trust changes showed clear manipulation. Even my Social Security deposits had been quietly redirected. You know what this reminds me of? I said one afternoon, stirring my tea. When Tom and I first bought our house. Remember all those papers? Hard to forget. Wallace smiled. Tom insisted on reading every single line. He always said the devil's in the details. The memory of my husband's patience warmed me. I wish he could see you helping me now. He'd be proud of you, Anna, standing up for yourself. I nodded, then noticed Wallace's expression shift. What is it? Just got word from my contact at the IRS. He lowered his voice. They've been watching Danielle's salon. Seems she's been creative with her bookkeeping. Creative how? Let's just say mixing personal and business funds is only the start. He tapped a folder. The seizure order's already signed. I thought about Danielle's precious salon, her empire, as she called it. When? Any day now. Wallace gathered the papers. Are you ready for what comes next? It won't be pretty. I remembered all those meals alone in the garage. I can handle ugly. Back at the house, the tension was becoming unbearable. Rick had started keeping a flask in his desk drawer. I could smell it on his breath when he passed my room. Danielle barely came home anymore, sleeping at her salon most nights. Their perfect facade was cracking like old paint. One morning, I was pretending to read in the garage when I heard car doors slam out front. Through the window, I saw 2 sheriff's vehicles and what looked like tax agents. My heart raced as I watched them approach the front door. Rick answered their knock. Even from the garage, I could hear the official voices. Is Danielle Montgomery home? We have a court order. She's at the salon, Rick stammered. Then his phone rang, Danielle's ringtone. He answered it on speaker, his hands shaking. They're here, Danielle's voice crackled through, high and panicked. At the salon, with fucking padlocks. Rick, do something. Ma'am, I heard one of the officers say, we have simultaneous orders for both locations. Please remain calm. Calm? They're seizing everything. My business. My life. Danielle's screech made Rick wince. This is your fault. Your stupid firm's investigation led them straight to us. My fault? Rick's voice cracked. You're the one who insisted on using Mom's money. Oh, don't you dare. You signed everything. You knew exactly what we were doing. I sat very still, watching their world implode through the garage window. Rick paced the driveway, running his hands through his hair. The officers waited patiently, documenting everything. If you hadn't been so greedy, Rick started. If you hadn't been such a coward, Danielle cut him off. A real man would have protected his wife's business. Protected? From what, your tax fraud? From your mother. This all started when you let her move in. When you got soft. Their voices echoed across the neighborhood. I saw curtains twitching in other houses. Rick noticed too and tried to lower his voice. Danny, please. The officers are still here. I don't care anymore. It's over. Everything we built. Her voice broke. Just fix this. Fix it or don't come home. The line went dead. Rick stood there, phone in hand, looking lost. The officers finished their paperwork and left, leaving him alone in the driveway. Through the baby monitor, I heard him muttering, "What have we done? What have we done?" I picked up my phone and texted Wallace, "It's happening, just like you said." His response came quickly, "Good. Now watch them crumble. The lawsuit hits tomorrow." I set my phone down and sipped my cooling tea, listening to the sound of Rick opening his flask in the middle of the day. The garage didn't feel so cold anymore. The morning after the salon seizure, Danielle packed her bags into her Range Rover. "I'm staying with Madison," she announced to the empty foyer. Rick stood silently, watching her leave. The door slammed, rattling the family photos that never included me. A heavy quiet settled over the house. I maintained my routine, anxiously awaiting Wallace's update. At noon, Rick burst in, dropping his briefcase. His face was ashen. "Mom?" His voice cracked. "I need to talk to you." I looked up from my crossword. "Yes?" "The firm's terminating me. There's an ethics investigation. Howard Matthews is threatening to sue." "What did you expect? Playing with other people's money?" "Mom, please, call off the lawyers. Like you did with my trust? My house money?" His face flushed. "That was Danielle's idea. But you participated." I felt decades of disappointment surface. "You watched me live in that garage, knowing what you'd done." His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from angry clients. His reputation was crumbling. "Is exactly what you earned," I said, standing. Danielle burst in, mascara streaked. She slapped down divorce papers. "You destroyed everything. Madison's lawyer saw the books. We're professionally ruined." She turned to me. "Happy now? This isn't revenge, dear. It's justice." That night, I saw Rick sitting alone in the garage, flask in hand, illuminated by the same flickering bulb that had been my companion. Through the baby monitor, I heard him whisper, "What kind of son am I?" I switched it off. That was his question to answer. The next morning brought more official cars, more papers, more consequences. Rick accepted each envelope with slumped shoulders while Danielle's seized salon remained dark, their carefully built image crumbling. The morning sun cast shadows across Rick's driveway as I zipped my final suitcase. 30 years of motherhood, marriage, and memories fit into 3 bags and a box. Wallace had helped pack the essentials: earlier documents, photos, and the jewelry from Tom I'd saved. "Need help?" Wallace stood in my laundry room bedroom doorway, eyes kind behind his glasses. "No thanks." I touched the worn leather carry-on from my last Yellowstone trip with Tom. "I'll do this part alone." He nodded. The realtors found 3 lakefront places, all with good security, and doors that lock from the inside. My throat tightened at these small dignities. Perfect. I swept the room one last time, checking empty drawers and the clean bed beneath. Leaving brings back every moment lived there, even the painful ones. The house was quiet. Rick gone, probably to his lawyer. Danielle's car sat in the driveway, but she'd hidden since the divorce papers arrived. The silence felt heavy, like pre-storm air. I wheeled past unrecognizable family photos. The kitchen counter, where I'd once taught Rick baking, now held legal notices. I didn't linger. The garage door squealed open. That sound once meant exile, now it meant freedom. Dust caught the morning light. My card table stood empty, coffee rings finally cleaned. Too late for that. The baby monitor blinked on the shelf, such a small thing that changed everything. I unplugged it and took it. Sometimes the smallest weapons matter most. "Ready to go," Wallace called from his sedan. Through the window, Danielle watched, makeup hiding little. Our eyes met briefly. I didn't smile or wave, just looked back steadily. She turned away first. No goodbye from Rick. Some cowardice runs deep. Wallace helped load my bags despite my protests. First properties in an hour, corner unit, Lakeview. In the passenger seat, my reflection showed in the garage door, faint, but stronger somehow. As we backed away, I faced forward, done looking back. "Ready?" Wallace asked. I thought of lakefront mornings and mailboxes with my name, of doors that locked. "More than ready," I said, meaning it. The morning light hit different here. You know how some sunrises feel like they belong to you? That's what I had now, my own private light show every dawn, streaming through windows I'd chosen, warming floors I'd picked myself. The condo wasn't large, but it was mine. Every inch spoke of freedom, from the kitchen with its yellow curtains to the reading nook with my husband's old armchair. The lake stretched beyond my windows like a promise kept, throwing diamonds of sunlight. Wallace had helped me find it. After 7 properties, I stepped inside this one, and something in my chest loosened. "This is it," I'd whispered, and Wallace nodded, already calling the realtor. Now Wallace visits every Wednesday. We share tea in proper cups, work the crossword puzzle together. Sometimes we discuss the legal proceedings or Rick's career salvage attempts. Mostly, we enjoy the quiet. 7 across, Wallace says, tapping his pen. 9 letters, coming back to life. Rebirth, I answer, sharing a knowing look. Healing sneaks up on you. One morning I realized I hadn't thought about the garage in days. Another time I caught myself humming while gardening. Small victories add up. The neighbors are different too. Mrs. Chen brings dumplings. The Hendersons wave during dog walks. No suspicious glances or whispered conversations, just simple kindness. When they installed my mailbox, I watched from the doorway, heart dancing. The deep blue metal matched my door, but the brass plaque caught my throat-me name, alone in the sunlight. I wrote myself a letter on cream stationery. Dear me, you made it through the dark, the betrayal, the fear. You found this place where sun rises over water, and neighbors know your name. The garage is just a room now. The tears watered your strength. The silence taught you to speak. Love yourself. Lifting that mailbox flag felt like reaching for tomorrow. Standing there, watching the lake ripple, I felt peace arrive quiet as dawn stealing over water. The morning of the final hearing, I woke before my alarm. Some days feel different from the start, like the air knows something's about to change. I padded to the kitchen in my rose-printed slippers from Mrs. Chen, setting up my laptop in the breakfast nook. The lake was mirror smooth outside. Wallace had shown me how to access the virtual courtroom link, ensuring I was comfortable with the technology. I made tea the proper way, loose leaves in grandmother's strainer, steeping 4 minutes. The sun warmed the room as I settled in. Wallace texted, "All set?" "Ready," I replied steadily. The courtroom appeared at 9 a.m. Rick and Danielle sat with their lawyers, both looking diminished. Judge Martinez appeared, her penetrating gaze filling the screen. After reviewing the evidence of financial elder abuse and trust manipulation, she began. "I find the defendant's actions legally reprehensible and morally unconscionable." I sipped tea, watching Rick pale. The systematic exploitation through forgery, isolation, and financial abuse represents the most predatory behavior this court has witnessed. Danielle's facade cracked as she reached for water with trembling hands. The judge ordered full restitution plus damages, barring both from fiduciary roles. Rick's career was finished. When she referred the forgeries to the district attorney, Danielle broke into genuine tears. Judge Martinez's gaze found me through the screen. "Mrs. Harrison, I commend your courage. We hope this judgment provides some justice." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said softly. After the hearing, I watched cardinals flit past my window. At my mailbox, I traced the new brass plaque reading, "Belongs to her." The metal was warm, like stored sunlight. I closed my eyes in the morning air, remembering my truth. Kindness isn't weakness, it's a loaded slingshot. They'd mistaken my quiet nature for submission. They'd forgotten that hands that mended clothes could hold justice. Standing there, I felt peace settle over me like morning light. I believe stories like this find us for a reason. If this one touched you, please subscribe. I share a new one every day, and tomorrow's might be the one your heart's been waiting for.